Okay, I saw the thumb went up, so that's good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start. So good evening, everybody, to the City Council meeting for South Burlington for May 6, 2024. We will start with item 1, which is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask our Deputy City Manager, Fire Chief Stephen Locke, to lead us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The second is instructions on exiting the building in case of an emergency and review of technology options. Jesse Baker, City Manager.
Thank you. So for those in the room, thanks for joining us tonight. If there's an emergency in this room, you can go out the left or right rear side of the auditorium and then turn left or right to get outside. For those participating remotely, if you'd like to speak during any item on our agenda, please turn your camera on and the chair will call on you, or you can indicate your interest in speaking in the chat and I'll have the chair call on you. Other than that, we are not monitoring the chat for content. And obviously those in the room are also more than welcome to speak during any agenda item as well. Thanks.
So item 3 is agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items on tonight's agenda? We do have a 7 o'clock public hearing, right? So if need be, we may juggle a few items if we go too quickly before that happens. So just be aware of that. Okay.
And I did have a question. Too.
Sure.
If we wanted to, I don't think we took it off here.
Is your mic on?
On item 9, if we wanted.
Your microphone? Is your mic on?
Oh, sorry. It was not on. I had a question about whether we wanted to hold agenda item 9, which is a general discussion of the first 2 months of the new council, until Lori and Mike could be in attendance at that.
It's a good question.
I'd be willing to postpone it.
Yeah, I would too. So let's postpone item 9 until, I guess, the second meeting in May?
20th, right?
Should be.
No, I don't think Lori's back for that meeting.
Oh, not yet? Oh, okay.
So I think you should go pretty second meeting in June.
Okay.
If you want to table it, because
Okay.
your first meeting in June is very busy right now.
Okay. All right, so we're going to strike number 9. Any other agenda items? No? Okay. Let's move on to item number 4, which is comments and questions from the public for items not on our agenda tonight. I see that we probably have 2 or more. Please go ahead. And when you get up to the mic, if you haven't been here before, there's a little push word on there. Click it once to make the light bright green.
Like that?
And then tell us who you are and where you live.
Hi, I'm Crystal Walsh-Kimball. I live over here on Dorset Street at Town Square.
Could you say your name more slowly, please?
Crystal Walsh-Kimball.
Bristol, okay. And Dorset Street, okay.
So Friday, my son finished school, and there's the 4-way crosswalk over by Tuttle Middle School. My son was hit by a car. Because there is no security, crossing guards, or cameras, it was a hit and run. I am requesting that the town put security cameras up over in that intersection and have the school hire some security guards for when children are exiting school.
And just to be clear, was this the crosswalk that does have a crossing light on it? That's
Yes.
at the intersection of the exit from the high school, middle school parking lot and the...
It's the one that crosses on the side of Tuttle,
Yeah,
crossing Dorset Street. And there is a crosswalk, and right before there is actually a crossing sign.
right.
Lady was in a rush, hit my son, rolled her window down, apologized to my son, and told my son he was in a rush, and just took off. The police are involved, but unfortunately, because there's no cameras and no security, this woman's going to get away with hitting my son.
Is your son okay?
He is. He's got bumps and bruises, but my son's 12. He's little itty-bitty, and it could have been a lot worse. But it's a hit and run, and there was no security camera, no security, no crossing guard, and it's just unsafe in that intersection. And I was actually walking there across there today with my son and my dog, and people were just sitting on the crosswalk and scooching forward, hoping that it would turn green while we were on the crosswalk, and it's a very dangerous intersection for children. So,
Did this person run a red light?
yes, they did.
Thanks.
So that's all I'm requesting, is just get some crossing guards over there while kids are leaving school and security cameras up on that intersection.
Right. We will take your words tonight, and we can't really give you feedback tonight because
know.
it's not on the agenda, but, you know, there's ongoing work for the safe school routes. There's a task force that works on this, and there's a lot of activity around that right now, especially on Dorset Street. There are going to be some changes made and a school zone installed to lower the speed limits. So this is a very unfortunate incident. I'm glad that
I mean,
you're,
we've lived here for 2 months.
yeah, 2 months.
It is a priority item
Yeah.
for the schools in the town, that strip, and there's a lot of work going on. So I think you will see in the near to medium future, a lot of improvements.
Okay,
But we're all very grateful that he wasn't more severely injured,
yes. Do you want me to hit the button?
if you like, yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that? Are there typically security, or I'm sorry, cameras where there are traffic lights?
It really depends on the infrastructure and the age and whatnot.
So it's not a given then? Okay, thank you.
I don't know if it's a camera, it's like a dome, and then it's got like these holes with like these white things on them. I don't know if that's a camera, and if there is, it'd be great if somebody could pull it.
So this, as my colleagues have said, this is an active police investigation, so they are working on all options, which I know is not necessarily reassuring to you in this moment.
Great. Please, come to the podium.
Hello again.
I think you've been here before.
Orlando, South Burlington. Oh, I'm not on. I always forget. Hey, again, pickleball. From the New York Times, shattered nerves, sleepless nights, pickleball noise is driving everyone nuts. Incessant pop, pop, popping of the fast-growing sport has brought on nationwide scourge of unneighborly clashes, petition, calls to the police, and lawsuits. The most grating and disruptive sound in the entire athletic ecosystem right now may be the staccato pop, 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 emanating from America's rapidly multiplying pickleball courts. From the Washington Post, a Canadian couple went on a hunger strike due to the insufferable sound of pickleball with auditory hallucinations, heart flutters, and insomnia. So the question is it torture? Torture is sound fatigue, listening fatigue, and the goal of listening fatigue is the sound of torture is to cause listening fatigue. Well, pickleball noise does not yet fall under torture devices under international law. It does have something in common with torture. We can't turn it off. Again, let me just remind you, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, from March, possibly until the end of November. We cannot suffer this. This neighborhood has been turned on its head. I have a little more, and then I have actually some good suggestions for maybe some solutions, because I don't just complain. I like to help with the solution. So another study says pickleball noise creates human health risk. Heart palpitations, anxiety, anger, frustration, insomnia, auditory hallucinations. During city council meetings in Punta Gorda Historic District, the people said noise causes anxiety, panic attacks. It's being said over and over from coast to coast. This is a new sport that took off around COVID time, and it hasn't been researched. I don't know what the council or committee that voted this in did for research, but I've done a lot since pickleball started. And I can tell you, it has made my life a living, won't say the word. Pickleball noise creates health risk, as the link between certain types of noise, which include the types of noise emanated by pickleball and the risk of hypertension, heart disease, etc., is well established. Pickleball noise exceeds the limits set for an objective science-based community noise ordinances. Pickleball noise exceeds, I'm saying it over and over to get my point across because that's all I do is hear pickleball. It exceeds the accepted U.S. and international standards and guidelines such as those produced by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, World Health Organization, etc., for community and environmental noise. Emissions and levels. Pickleball noise significantly increases community noise levels relative to existing ambient noise levels, and the relationship between community noise increase, and I could go on and on. I won't. You get my point. So pickleball noise is fueling drama, lack of communication, people just coming. And I've paid taxes in South Burlington for 3.5 decades, and now I'm paying for people from all other communities to come here and destroy my quality of life. And I really mean business about it needing to leave. I really do. The EPA has identified 55 decibels as the maximum average outdoor noise level that can be maintained throughout the day without impacting health and welfare. Health and welfare, 55 decibels. Pickleball is measured at 70 to 85 and can be heard 100 feet and more. I'm within that distance. You're going to add some laughing, let's add some yelling, let's add some swearing, let's add some cheering, let's add some dogs barking in parked cars. Let's put at the top of that list the children's safety from the speeding cars. And so the rec department heard us, and they stationed a nice young man named Aaron at 8 a.m. in the morning with his little speed thing. We've had
With his what?
with his little speed detector
Oh, okay.
for him to talk to people. And although we all appreciate that effort, nobody's there till noon or 2 at this point. So his report that he sends in will not reflect the truth or the problem. Let's see. I just want to go down to what might help. So you're our city council appointed to help us. That's the wrong place for pickleball. It's wrong. It's wrong. It has to go. You have to understand, cities and towns are being sued over this. I don't want to do that, but I do want pickleball to go. And here's a solution for the interim. Raise the courts to volleyball, badminton level. Take your advertising for Szymanski Park free pickleball off the internet, so it's not everybody coming that isn't even living here, doesn't suffer from the damage, doesn't suffer from the noise, and take the danger out of the neighborhood. It doesn't belong there. Or put a tennis court back in. I realize you can't pour a lot of money in right now, but you could raise the nets. Get pickleball out of there. And before, if you feel that there needs to be time to do that, lock the gates at 5 o'clock. Let us have some peace. Lock the gates for Sunday. Let us have our Sundays. This is just wrong. But I'm not mad at anybody. I'm just, I'm going to keep coming back until something's done. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to ask a question? Sure.
So, thank you for that, and not at all to minimize what you're feeling, but I'm wondering, have you measured the decibels, like, from your property line? I'm just wondering what the actual...
This is scientific research study that tells you it's even louder further from the courts.
I'm just asking, have you measured it?
I have not.
Okay,
I'm going with scientific.
okay, thank you.
Is there somebody online?
Monica.
Monica Osby? Monica, you're online. Can you?
Try again. Monica, try again.
Here we go. No?
Me?
Yep, there you go. We got you. Took us a minute,
Oh,
but we got
okay,
you.
great. Hi, hello, everybody. Long time. Hope everyone's well on this beautiful day. Thank you for being in there.
Is this Monica Osby?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hi, Monica. What's up?
Hello. So a quick public comment. I don't know what's going to happen with the school budget vote tomorrow. I really hope that it passes. I will be a resident who, if it does not pass, will be going to the school board to ask them to not just do another Band-Aid, but to really look at, what on earth we can do to have budgets that pass. And if that means major changes to city I'm sorry, to school organization, then okay. But I'm just really disappointed at what's happening in South Burlington and in the state with our education system. And the reason I'm coming to you with this comment is because this really is an all hands on deck time. There are big picture things that I think the city and the residents as a whole could really benefit from having a big picture look at what on earth is going to happen in the short term and the long term. You know, there's a new education secretary or whatever the person's title is. There will be changes coming, and who is advocating really for South Burlington and for other communities like us where there is a lot of poverty and a lot of people that are suffering? I beg the city council to be actively involved in supporting the school board however you can. And I would like to remind that we're coming up on about 10 years since the last master planning task force, which was a very, very valuable process that enabled community, city, and school people to come together to look at ideas and weigh them and have critical discussions about what we can do to make things better. And I think that it's high time that the city and the school work together to maybe revisit doing something like that. As a member of that task force, I cannot tell you how valuable that was. So this is just a plea from one resident to please, please, all hands on deck, work together, support our school board who has a tremendous amount already happening, as do you, but supporting South Burlington taxpayers as a whole is really necessary. One example I'll give is, why does our city charter dictate that all of the local option sales tax that we get back only go to city? Why does none of it go to school? What would happen if it did go to school? Would that make things better? I don't know the answer, but there are many questions that both city and school, I think, can look at together and help try to make something better happen for our residents and our school children and for everybody.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Thank you.
And don't forget, folks, the polls are open tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the 5 districts. Make sure you go and vote if you haven't already absentee voted. You will not be able to absentee vote tomorrow in City Hall. If you do have your ballots at home, you can bring them to the polling place and turn them in, or you could drop them in the box out front if you need to. Just make sure you do it before it gets too late. They will be delivered, to each polling place if they're put in the box up until, 5, 6 p.m. probably. Thank you. Mr. Doyle?
Ryan Doyle speaking, resident. I'm a lot shorter than the last woman who spoke. So I have a concern about the way appointments have been conducted. Executive session in statute 313 makes it very clear that no decisions can be made in executive session that aren't about property acquisitions. And that regarding the appointment of an officer, it may be discussed in executive session, but the final vote must be done in open session and reasons for the appointment must be given. As long as I've been coming to meetings, the appointments have been passed in a consent agenda without any discussion or reason given. And after executive session, the manager tells who was appointed, which would imply that that is the final vote happening and that the consent agenda is just a perfunctory kind of activity. So that's something I think the city needs to look at regarding following state statute for the sake of avoiding both a legal issue and because those statutes are there to make sure that the public can really see what's going on. We had an issue a couple of months ago during the previous council when the council was very upset with people who were speaking. and really push back against there being the claim of a lack of transparency. But we know that meetings often don't get posted on time. And while it's a low percentage, we have a lot of meetings. So as I clock one of these every month out of the meetings I'm paying attention to, that really adds up to the public not being able to be fully included. And I have brought up to you more recently about the lack of physical posting and the limitations of where we're posting, namely City Market and the school, where nobody walks past the school, and, sorry, not City Market, Healthy Living, or what a lot of folks call wealthy living, which really isn't the grocery store that most people shop at, or even the most popular grocery store. So I think there's a lot there that I'd really like to see the city take on regarding following process and making sure we're not just following the minimum standards set out by the state, but realizing that South Burlington is the second largest municipality in the state, and 89% are less than 5,000. 89% of municipalities have less than 5,000 people. And so the way that you interact with a populace that lives in different population centers and has a much broader commercial accessibility and doesn't really integrate around the town the same way, really how we reach out to those folks is important. And right now we know that if we do surveys or things like that, or even our general elections, that we get more turnout from more affluent areas and less input from areas that have more poverty or more renters, where there are more people of color living or other minorities. And how we as a city actually move forward in a way that's really healthy and inclusive is going to be really important in tackling problems, especially in those parts of the city. The other thing is that the city has an ethics policy. It's conflicts of interest and ethics policy for elected and appointed officials. And in two places, Section 5A and Section 6, it specifically mentions conflicts or perceived conflicts. And the conflict I want to point out here is if somebody is a campaign contributor and they are applying for a position, it should be noted by the councilor that this person has contributed to their campaign. So I remember reading that Helen had contributed to a political campaign recently. And when I actually pulled up the information from the Secretary of State's website, I found that 5 of the last 8 planning commissioners appointed were appointed after making some type of campaign contribution. And I have yet to find a record of any of those being disclosed at the meeting. I don't know if some of those have been disclosed, and I just haven't found the disclosures yet. But this is something that we should really think about making sure we're abiding by. I don't think the conflicts of interest policy has changed too much over the past few years, but I haven't really gone back more than 3 years to review it.
Mr. Doyle, I
Yeah.
have to ask you a question right now. Are you insinuating or implying, right, that there was a pay-for-play transaction here on any appointment to any city council committee? Because if you got to be very careful what you're saying here. I want to know if you're accusing anybody in South Burlington of paying to be placed on a committee. Because if you are doing that, this could turn out badly. If you're just raising an ethics, if you're raising an ethics
What do you mean it could
question,
turn out badly?
that's different, okay? And I just want you to tread lightly here.
But Tim, what do you mean it could turn out badly?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. But, you know, you got to be very careful when you start saying things about people that are not true. Because you're making inferences and insinuations in public that are not a good thing to do.
I think the pattern of pushing back against the public's search for accountability is one that you maybe should be a little bit more aware of.
Every contribution above $100 is visible in every campaign system in the Secretary of State's office. Anybody can go look at those if you want.
Yes, this is true.
There are a lot of campaigns that run here. A lot of people contribute to each other's campaigns.
And the ethics policy you signed says perceived or real conflicts of interest should be disclosed. I want to make that aware to you all.
So that's what you want to make aware of?
Yes.
Is that the end of your statement?
No.
What else do you have to say? Because let's wrap it up.
Yeah, so it was really disappointing, besides Helen identifying herself in the paper as a planning commissioner 2 weeks ago without any formal vote on her becoming a commissioner. It was really disappointing to see two incredibly qualified candidates, Colin Lawrence, a transportation engineer, and Luke Bacchetti, who is an urban planner, who both represent a greater diversity than what's been seen on the Planning Commission in a long time. It's been a while since the chair asked the city council to appoint people who are younger, possibly renters, and people with more diverse professional backgrounds. And yet what we end up with is an executive session vote for somebody who's made campaign contributions, just like the last few who've been appointed, who don't really fit that description and have perhaps a very long history of not even being that great with planning. Somebody who says there's no way that we could have known the construction in city center would impact the school is not somebody I want serving on a planning commission. You might disagree with that, and you're more than welcome to. But I will end with reading the opening paragraph of the State Statute 315, Access to Public Records. It is the policy of this subchapter to provide for free and open examination of records consistent with Chapter 1, Article 6 of the Vermont Constitution. Officers of government are trustees and servants of the people, and it is in the public interest to enable any person to review and criticize their decisions, even though such examination may cause inconvenience or embarrassment.
I just, for the public, like to correct one factual misstatement. There was no public vote in executive session. That is what's on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please come to the podium. Thank you. And make sure you tell us your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is John Beekler. I live on Worth Street in South Burlington.
Beekler?
Beekler.
How do you spell that?
Buechler.
Okay.
And I'm here also to talk about pickleball and the impact that it's having on the neighborhood in South Burlington where I live.
Down in near Szymanski Park?
Yes, yes. The increased amount of traffic that's coming in and the amount of people that are in the neighborhood that are just waiting to cause a problem. And by the problem, I mean, I think some kid's going to get hurt. There are so many families that live on Andrew Street going up towards Szymanski Park that in the amount of traffic that comes up, there's 4 pickleball courts, 4 people playing at a time, an hour per game. That's a great number of people that come into our neighborhood, and they drive too fast. I live on Worth Street, which is right off of Imperial. People come up Imperial and move their way up to Andrews to go to the park. They go too fast. And yes, we had a police officer there a few mornings, but 8 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, no one's playing pickleball, particularly with the weather we had earlier in the week and last week. So I took my dog for a walk just before I came over here, and there were a dozen cars there. And kids outside, people walking, like myself. Last summer, I went to the Citizens Committee, the Recreation and Parks Committee, and ask them how that park was recommended that the city put in. And the chairman was very honest and said, a group of people came to the committee and wanted to have access to parks to play pickleball. And it was recommended that that park, the 2 tennis courts, the 1 tennis court be converted into 4 pickleball courts. There was no discussion. There was no impact study for the community. There was no discussion on what that was going to do to the traffic. This is all the admission of the committee when I went to talk to them. There was also no benchmarking with other communities that have the same situation. This is a small community, a small neighborhood that abuts up to Stonehenge. We also have, I'm sorry, let me back up. What's happening is there's just, in addition to the noise that Giovanna spoke about, my main concern is the traffic. And it shouldn't have been put in my opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public? All right, moving on to councilors' announcements. Mr. Chownick, would you like to report?
Of course. Before I do, will we have maybe be able to put on an agenda discussion of the,
Pickleball?
yeah, course
Yeah.
of time? Yeah, okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. Yeah, 2 things. So, I've been away, but from Bonaire, I zoomed into the Economic Development Committee meeting where we heard a presentation from a UVM professor, I think, describing all kinds of economic data with respect to South Burlington that I think will be very useful and kind of lay a foundation for future work of that committee. Interestingly, we're a very educated place. 69%, I think, of the adults have bachelor's degrees, which was like double the rest of the country. Unfortunately, we don't earn as much as the rest of the country, so we got to figure out why that is with all that, with such a highly educated workforce. As of the date of that data, our housing prices seemed pretty much in line with the rest of the country, medium housing values, but our cost of living is higher, and it wasn't really clear what's driving that, if it's not housing, and we're going to try and dig into that a bit more. Then I did also participate in Green Up Day. I saw Councilor Barrett there as well. Cleaned up along Spear Street and helped a neighbor remove a very long and heavy rusty metal cable from a trail down by Red Rocks Park. So that's my report.
Elizabeth?
I'm not on Economic Development meeting, Planning Commission meeting. The Affordable Housing Committee partnered with the library and AARP for a discussion on ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, in South Burlington, as well as a book discussion on housing and homelessness. I participated in the Library Board of Trustees. I had an opportunity, along with my colleague Mike Scanlon, to participate and witness the pinning, promotion, and recognition for years of service of the fire department with Steve Locke. And I have to note that that was an impressive ceremony. The camaraderie of that group was remarkable. I also think Steve is proud of, and should be, of the number of women that were pinned in the group, and also what appeared to me to be a very proactive succession plan, which I think is always tough in a tight labor market, but also for services like the fire department. I participated in a couple of school board meetings, so I'm very aware of the budget changes that are being presented to voters tomorrow. And I think that highlights most of it. Oh, the other one is I did testify in front of the House Operations and Military Affairs Committee on H 886, which was the expansion of the school board from 5 to 7 members, and the Senate hearing for government ops is tomorrow. So I believe I'm tied up at the polls, but I think Anne Lalonde, who is part of the City Charter Committee, will be testifying on behalf of the city in that hearing. And it does look like that charter change may get tagged to a bill this session, so it's possible it could be passed and in effect by next year.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to go on vacation because it was a school vacation. My son's a teacher at the high school. We flew to Miami. I'd never been to Miami Beach, stayed at the South Beach area. We were fortunate to come across the fact that there was a very an active woman named Barbara Kapitman, if I pronounce it correctly, who in the 70s had the foresight to work very hard with a group of other women to preserve the Art Deco hotels along Ocean Drive in South Miami Beach. And then we also went to Sarasota, where I drove through my first diverging diamond interchange, which is what they're constructing at exit 16 at Costco. And we came off the highway and immediately were shunted to the left-hand lanes under the overpass and then back to the right-hand lanes and continued on. So that's a really interesting design for dealing with interstate interchanges. We also spent some time at Fort Lauderdale and discovered another tribute to another famous woman, Ivy Stranahan, who was a lead suffragist in that area, and she and her husband were philanthropists as well. And they have preserved her house right there in downtown Fort Lauderdale. While in Miami, Deputy City Manager Stephen Locke helped organize an emergency city council meeting, which was warned properly to move some liquor license actions, and we got that done remotely. Then I came back and did take a ride down to Szymanski Park, I think it was last Friday, and listened to the noise. Made some observations. I'd like to go back on other times when it's probably busier. At that point, there were only 2 of the courts being used. I know that Councilor Scanlon has made 2 trips down to that park as well. I don't want to speak for him, but he did tell me he had gone down there. I did participate in some green-up activities. I took a picture of Mr. Chownick, which hopefully will make the other paper. We're going to see. And as a side note, my son was involved in the Strut fashion show down at the Hula on Saturday. Usually that's part of the Art Hop, but it was disconnected after 2019. They hadn't had it since 2019. It was fairly well attended, and there were about 10 designers there, and there was a lot of really great work. We hope to have something in the other paper about that as well. This morning I attended a meeting that was led by Dr. Leffler, who is the president of the UVM Medical Center, as they start their public outreach to introduce people to the design of their outpatient surgical center that's been proposed on Tilley Drive. That's in the field right next to the Red Barn, and why they need that surgical capacity and what its effects will be on the Fannie Allen facility. And then we also had a leadership meeting with the chair of the school board and the Superintendent Violet this morning, actually about 1 o'clock, and then we had a BCA meeting in preparation tonight for the election tomorrow. Elizabeth and I will be working very hard tomorrow at the polls. Mr. Chownick, you're going, that's right, you're going on vacation. Oh, okay, that's too bad. Okay, well, you're going to miss the fact that they're going to have half pepperoni, half cheese at the 5 o'clock pizzas that'll be delivered, which we didn't have. Yeah, sorry. So. And that's all I have. Dizzy?
Great. Just a couple updates from me. At your next meeting in May, a facilitator from Assembly Theory, a consulting firm, will be here to help us have a conversation about the use of data to make policy decisions in the city. So we'll have a memo for you in advance, but bring your thoughts on the data you would like to see moving forward to make policy decisions. I want to provide a few hiring updates. Today was the first day of Patty Wayman, who is our new rental registry manager. She comes to us with lots of experience in lots of different sectors, but most recently as fulfilling this role in the city of Burlington. So really excited to have her on board. We also had 2 new firefighters start today. These individuals are replacing folks who have retired recently. And as Councilor Fitzgerald mentioned, with these hires, we are now 15% women in our fire department. I did a quick Google of standard for career fire departments across the country. It's 5%. So we are doing much better thanks to the culture change that Chief Locke and Chris Corbin and others in the department are leading. And then finally, in addition, we also have hired a full-time police dispatcher with dispatching experience. So that means that team is now full with no vacancies currently, knock on something. And then we also have offers out to 3 police officer candidates who will go to the academy in August. So that won't completely fill our ranks, but will get us a good way there. And then, as others have mentioned, not only did we have a really fun day on Saturday with Green Up Day, thank you to the community members who participated, we also had 140 children and families in this room at a children's author event. Tracy West, apparently a famous children's author who does a dragon series, was here doing a talk and a book signing, which was really sweet. So thanks to the community for coming out for that.
Jesse, do we have any stats on Green Up Day? How we did?
I don't today, but I would be happy to bring them for the next meeting.
So going to item number 6, which is the consent agenda. A, which is consider and assign the disbursements. B, which is approve the minutes from March 18th, 2024 for the city council meeting. And C, approve the following appointments. 1, Helen Reilly appointed to the Planning Commission for a term to end June 2026. 2, Christopher Kerrigan appointed to the Economic Development Committee for a term to end June 2025. 3, Rebecca Killian appointed to the Economic Development Committee for a term to end June 2027. And 4, Betty Barnes appointed to the Public Art Committee for a term to end June 2027. And I would like a motion to approve this consent
I
agenda.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Can I,
Can you wait till we ask for any discussion? Do we need a second?
if I'm proposing, let me just clarify a
Okay.
procedural question. If I'm proposing to pull an item off for a separate discussion, should I do that now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, could I, well, actually, 2 areas. I had asked some clarifying questions on A, on the disbursements. And then I wanted to propose that we pull C off just for a separate discussion.
Pull C off for later in the evening?
No, just in,
For
as separate
a separate discussion?
consent agenda items.
Okay. That's fine. Do you want to have a motion for A and B and then for discussion, then say what you want to say about A, or do you want to just say it now?
I can do that if I make that second or amend Andrew's initial motion to separate A and B and then have a separate discussion on C.
Could I ask a clarifying procedural question? Are you looking for separate votes on all of those items? Or are you looking just to have questions answered about the consent agenda?
More to have some comments and questions, yeah.
So I would recommend you, from a procedural point of view, and Colin, correct me here, second the motion to approve, have discussion, and then somebody can call the question, and if it fails, then you can pull off the items and vote them individually.
Thank you. I will second that motion then.
No discussion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
No,
Wait.
you have to have discussion.
Wait,
I think she wants to have
She wants
discussion.
Now the discussion.
Yes.
I did have questions on disbursements, and I
Right.
did
you didn't get answered?
not get responses on that
Oh, I thought you-
before the meeting.
I think I didn't send them in time, so I'd be happy to walk through, I sent them, but I don't think
I
I
think they're
sent them
pretty
in.
brief
time
if you're
for-
willing to cover them.
I would be happy to
Can we
cover
do that
those.
as discussion now?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, if you don't mind, I'll just walk through them. So you had asked really good questions about the vehicle purchases and the leases that are on your disbursements for tonight. So yes, there are 6 vehicle, actually, Steve, do you want to answer this one? who did this research.
There were 6 vehicles on the on this week's manifest. So our process is during the annual budget process, which starts in September, it's also part of built into the capital plan, our fleet replacement based on age of vehicles. And so most of these vehicles had all been ordered quite some time ago as replacement vehicles. So there's 3 in Public Works, 2 pickup trucks, and then 1 mini dump truck replacing older, outdated vehicles. And then there were 3 patrol cars, 2 of which were in the annual budget, and 1 was due to a cruiser that was destroyed in a collision earlier this year, or late last year. The timing I have a little bit off. So that is how the vehicle process works. We do not finance vehicles. They're all baked into the budget.
Great, thank you.
So the next question was about the Stitzel, Page and Fletcher tax sale bill. So Stitzel, Page and Fletcher are our outside counsel for tax sales specifically. They solely do that book of business for us. This property recently went to tax sale. At the point of sale, 2 checks are issued to the city. One is for the payment of past due taxes, and one is for the purchase price of the home if it goes to tax sale. The city then passes that money back, the second check, basically back to Stitzel, Page and Fletcher to hold in escrow as the property owner has a year to true up the delinquencies. So it's a kind of a money in, money out expenditure, but we have to run it through our warrant process for that paper trail. And now that property owner has a year to true up. I will say this is the first tax sale that's gotten to this step in the process since I've been here. When I asked about this specific property last week, this property has actually been in tax sale before, but this is the first one we've done in a while, and hopefully they true up and maintain their property. The third question was a question about the $178,000 to VHB for the bike ped bridge and whether was that grant funded. So yes, it was majority grant funded, that payment. However, there are multiple funding sources going into that project. Excuse me, and the 2 significant RISE grants are match grants. So it is primarily grant funded, but there is also other funds, general funds in that as well. And then the final question you asked was about the airport parkway loan held in Wilmington Trust. So this is our regular payment on a 2014 bond for the expansion of the airport parkway wastewater treatment plant, and that debt expires in 2032.
Great, thank you.
And I do want to know, Steve and I are filling in tonight for Martha. She had a family emergency, so cannot be here tonight, but she is the expert. Thanks.
Yeah, I could see how you wouldn't know about the airport because it was truncated in the spreadsheet, so. And another item about those tax sales, there's a 1-year period by which the owner can pay it back and regain title or whatever deed. But if the tax sale actually does go, if that does happen, right, then the person who did buy it and put the money out, into escrow, then an interest has to be paid on that money, is my understanding. And it used to be 6%, I think. I think that is, yeah, well, it's not tagged to, any deposit rate, so.
Great, I appreciate that, thank you.
Good questions.
So do we want to go ahead and, we had a motion for A
Now,
and
I
B?
have discussion on C as well.
Okay, so you wanted to pull C out, though. Do you want to vote on A and B separately now?
Well, the motion was to vote on all of them.
Okay.
And seconded, so I'd have
Go
the
ahead.
discussion now. I'm going to go look at Colin. I have discussion now. Thank you very much. I did want to just reflect on 2 things, just among our council and colleagues here. And one was on reflection, and this is somewhat a reflection of agenda planning, but the committee selection process got to be pretty late at the meeting we made that. In hindsight, I do, as I reflected on it, I think we might have been better served to come out of that meeting back into public session and made that decision at the time, and made that in public session. It was very late, and again, so there's an element of kind of agenda planning in a reasonable time frame, but there's also an element of going into executive session, having that conversation, and then coming back into public session and making those appointments. I think there was an effort because we had a gap and there were meetings coming up where that there was an understanding that those individuals weren't appointed until we had this meeting, but that they might have an opportunity to sit and observe like any community member would at any of those meetings. So just a reflection and sort of a challenge to ourselves to kind of always get better. Maybe when we have those executive or discussions in executive sessions to come out and back into public session and consider taking that vote in the same
Evening.
timeframe. Evening, yeah, correct.
That's fine. We have in the past had twice as many applicants that had to be interviewed and have had a separate meeting dedicated to just that. And Councilor Scanlon brought that up with me, and he was dismayed that of how long the meeting went because of those interviews. And you really can't get around the fact that you need to give, 5-6 minutes to each person to accommodate our questions and their comments. And so I don't think that we can make that process go any faster, but maybe we need to, when we come to the summertime and those new appointments, we probably should have a separate meeting for that. And then do this exactly what you said, which is, come out of executive. And
Your suggestion to go into public sessions and then remove ambiguity about the status of those appointments for the public, is that?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
link it to the
Yeah, okay.
discussion in executive session.
Yeah.
Action in public.
Any other questions?
No.
Are you ready for the vote?
I mean,
So what do we have for the motion? A and B and C, or just, okay, so we have consent agenda A, B, and C that has been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. All right, thank you. And it's past 7 o'clock. Look at that. So we're at item 7, which is hold the second reading and first public hearing of an update to the sign ordinance, take action to approve the sign ordinance as presented, or set a second public hearing for June 3rd, 2024 at 7 p.m. And Paul Connor and Colin are here tonight. I have, hold on a second. Oh, you've got it already printed out for me, okay. So I have sort of a script here to read. So bear with me, everybody. So welcome, everybody that's out in the audience and online. Tonight, we will hold our second reading and public hearing on amendments to the city's sign ordinance. We've already held a first public reading of this ordinance on April 1st. Tonight's hearing and the second public reading were noticed in accordance with the city's charter. The purpose tonight is to hear from you, the public. We won't be responding to individual comments during the hearing, except perhaps to ask a clarifying question to make sure we understand a commenter's point. We will take all that we've heard tonight during the hearing, together with any correspondence we received, and have a council discussion and possible vote after the hearing has been closed. Procedurally, we will have comments from folks who are in person and folks attending remotely. If you're in person, please walk up to the podium, and I will call on you. For those attending remotely, please indicate that you would like to speak in the chat function. Our city manager, Jesse Baker, will keep a running tab of those wishing to speak. To be fair to everybody, I'll attempt to mix in both in-person and remote attendees. If you are participating remotely, turn on your mic and your video if you wish when I call your name. Lastly, I'd like ask that everybody please keep your comments brief and succinct, and I'll ask you to try not to repeat comments made by others. If needed, I'll apply a time limit, but let's start with everyone self-monitoring. If there is a time remaining after everyone who wants to speak has spoken, I will entertain a second comment if it is new information. So now I think I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So I move to open the public hearing and waive the formal reading of the duly warned proposed amendments to the city sign ordinance pursuant to 24A VSA, Chapter 13, Section 106.
I'll second that.
We have motion second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are now in public hearing. Good evening. What's changed?
As noted in, Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning, as noted in my staff memo, staff did not receive any comments to date. We did send the draft, obviously as required, to all the public notices, as well as to the South Burlington Business Association, and let the folks here in the core city center who are building the buildings around us know about the draft. As I said, we have not received any written public comment, but you may have received some orally tonight. Staff does have one recommended change that we can talk about following the public hearing if you like, that is outlined in the memo. And then we've seen that Councilor Fitzgerald has some questions. Again, happy to answer those for you following the public hearing, as that's really a council discussion, so.
All right, so you've had no written comments. Do we have any public comments tonight from the public? In the auditorium? Online? Anybody have their hand raised online or have put anything in the chat? This could be a very short public hearing. So there's no public input at the public hearing. I guess we could close the public hearing.
So I move to close the public hearing. I propose amendments as warned to the City of South Burlington's sign ordinance pursuant to 24 VSA, Chapter 13, Section 106.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 So the hearing is closed. I have a question. So when you're talking about perpendicular signs, right, on storefronts, are they, well, you know, shingles? Remember the piece you would hang your shingle? Is that what we're talking about? Is it?
That's exactly right. So some places call it a projecting sign, some call it a perpendicular sign. It's essentially one that sticks out from the building instead of flat.
It's a
too.
cantilever, like, from the side of the
Exactly,
building?
yep.
Okay.
Yep, so the proposed adjustment here is that in the draft from April 1st, it read that each business could have one of up to 21 square feet. That should have read building, that sometimes a building chooses to have one for all their tenants. Typically, for an individual tenant, they are much closer to 5 or 6 square feet, and to have multiple tenants having 21 square feet would be very large on a building. So that's our recommendation. The timeline, and we're aware that it's important to move this forward, but the timeline still works if you move it to your first meeting in June.
Thank you.
And then happy to answer Councilor Fitzgerald's questions if you'd like.
I didn't bring the ones I had, but first off, thank you. When I went back and really looked at this, I feel like this was a good ordinance to cut my teeth on. But it is a little overwhelming to look at the length of something specific to signs. And of course, now I'm driving around town or biking going, oh, wow, there's a lot of signs here.
Signs are a fascinating and complex topic all around the country.
had
And a
no
couple of your
idea.
questions allude directly to that, so happy
Yeah,
to.
and I actually had let me preface with a couple I had, but I did want to first thank you for, one, the summary of amendments was very helpful to me. Subsequently, sort of, it ends up being a big red line document, so it's kind of hard to go through and, for somebody who isn't accustomed to that. But a couple of quick overriding questions for me is, this is specific to city center. Is there another sign ordinance that applies to?
So there's a section of it that is specific to city center, but the ordinance applies citywide. In my memo, when I alluded to city center, what I was referring to is that that's the timeline driver. The most significant changes are related to city center, but the ordinance applies citywide, and some of the changes as proposed, both in terms of the temporary signs and in terms of the allowance to have, instead of 2 wall signs, 3 wall signs in the same square footage, that would be a citywide.
Perfect. And then who is the code officer?
The council appoints the code officer. In this instance, the code officer is Marla Keene, who's also our development review planner. And then our office has 3 assistant code officers, one of whom I am. So we're all authorized, but that's part of council's annual appointments in March.
Great. And then is there an obligation when an ordinance is updated or modified? And some of this is just me being new to a process. Are we building off an existing ordinance, or are we benchmarking other towns' ordinances and sort of saying these are best practices? But do we look at sort of examples of we don't want this to continue and sort of build in an ordinance accordingly. So is there an obligation to notify when we know there's potential violations of a proposed ordinance? Well, actually, once it's adopted.
Well, so let me start with the first half of the question, then I might turn to Colin for the second half. So for the first half of your question, I think it's all of the above. So when we're looking at an ordinance like the sign ordinance or impact fee ordinance or whichever ones you may see, I think it's a combination of we're looking at how our municipality is changing and how our ordinances need to keep up with our specific municipality. We know that there are, Jesse, how many municipalities in the country? 20,000, 30,000? So no question has never been asked. And so we do look to other communities. And then we are looking to updated case law that is taking place. And we certainly look at our neighbors as well when we're looking at Vermont-specific issues, and either from the legal lens or from a consistency lens or from the lens of things have been tried, and we know the people and we can ask the question. So I think it's really all the above. In terms of looking at how an amendment to an ordinance would create a new nonconformity, this is a little bit of a nuanced area, but in the world of zoning and our land development regulations, when something is lawfully in existence at the time that an ordinance is adopted, or sorry, the regulation is adopted, or it was existed before we ever had zoning, it has a right under state law to continue to exist in perpetuity. That does not necessarily apply to ordinances. And so most famously in Vermont, there used to be billboards in Vermont, and there are not billboards in Vermont. And so in the instance of the sign ordinance, there is a period of time during which the value essentially of a sign can be amortized, and then it would need to come into compliance. In this round of amendments, there are very few, if any, circumstances where the regulation is becoming more restrictive. I think the only instance that I can think of is that for some signs in the general city center area, there is currently a maximum height of 15 feet that would be reduced to 12 feet. But in all the other instances, like there's an instance where we're saying that new signs as they come in would have to be opaque in their background. That only applies, we wrote it carefully to make sure that we're not creating, 500 or 300 nonconformities, that it only comes when that business, either it's a new business comes in or they decide to update it. So we try to be mindful of, or we are mindful of, what are the circumstances under which something is being created as requiring a change. Did you have anything that you wanted to add to that, Colin?
I have nothing to add to that, no. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I did have a couple others, and if they're not material, Paul, you can ignore them.
No, I'd be happy to go through them if that's okay, Councilor Barrett. So I'll just go through the punch list here. First question was amendments as voted on at the last meeting were noted in my staff memo. The vote was to warn the public hearing, and as part of that, there is a specific set of regulations that you warned a public hearing for. So it wasn't a vote to adopt, but it was a vote that this is the version that you're sending to a public hearing. You asked about clarifying that the sign ordinance would not impact the bike ped paths. So the city is essentially exempt from the sign ordinance. I say essentially because those proposing it still need to bring them to the code officer to sort of look for general consistency. Also, not to get super nuanced in this, but there's actually a Vermont state law that municipalities that want to have signs around, whether they're gateway signs, welcome signs, that kind of thing, it is required to have a package that the municipality has adopted. And so years ago, 10, 12 years ago, the Planning Commission and Council adopted a sign package. So that is as long as they're consistent with that, then they're consistent with state law. Language on alignment with the land development regulations, that's really about, that was in reference to, in our city center area, our regulations have required the buildings go right up to the street, which is intended to create a pedestrian-oriented environment. The side effect of that is that the more appropriate signs to go with it are these ones that Councilor Barrett was referring to of pedestrian-oriented signs, and so that's aligning it to not have freestanding signs sort of perched on top of a, next to a building, so it's
I think
really.
I saw that subsequently, yeah.
You asked about slightly adjusting the timeline to come into compliance. What does slightly mean? So currently we use 5 years. In the past, so 5 years from when we adopt a change, anything that is not in compliance needs to come into compliance. Historically, we looked back, we've used 7 years, and 7 years is also what I believe the state had originally done with the billboard law. Don't 100% quote me on that, but that's my recollection. And so we just felt that that's a little more defensible to just be consistent with ourselves historically.
And I thought that was pretty generous, not slight.
Well, it's 2 years change, yeah. Electronic marquee type signs, so anything anything that has moving animated signs are prohibited in the city. There is an allowance for higher education institutions to have an electronic sign as long as the message doesn't change less than every 5 minutes. In terms of the school district, in this, one of the proposed amendments in this set of packages is to put the school district in the same category as the city, which is exempt from the ordinance, which it was previously silent on that subject, but must be consistent with. So that's the category that that it falls under. So it doesn't explicitly speak about an electronic sign at the.
Yeah, and that discussion emanates from years ago. There was a discussion about the billboard that, or the, I call it a marquee, the sign that's at Dorset and Kennedy, which a lot of people seem to value being warned of, tax bills coming due and election dates and things like that.
School side.
Yes, but it's a very manual adjustment. So there was some discussion whether there could be a sign that could be changed electronically so somebody wasn't out in the dead of winter, sticking up letters. And I didn't know if that would be allowed under the new ordinance or if there was any discussion ever about that.
So I do recall the conversation that you're speaking of. That's the benefit of being here a while. I have not heard anything from the school since that discussion. I guess what I would say is it would be up to the determination of the code officer that it's consistent. In the best interests of all parties, I guess I would suggest that if that was something that the high school or other schools were genuinely interested in, I would suggest a proactive conversation. We want to be very careful to make sure that when we are asking ourselves to be consistent, that we are with the ordinance, even if it's exempt, that we are being thoughtful to other parties that may have a similar interest. And so I guess I would encourage that if they were interested, that would probably be best to be explicit as an amendment, rather than sort of a gray area, to be frank. Colin, would you like to answer the waiver fee question?
Absolutely. Councilor, you asked, what is the purpose of a waiver fee in lieu of a civil penalty if a person declines to contest a municipal complaint? So by statute, all of our ordinances, all our civil ordinances are required to have a penalty provision if we're going to be enforcing them. And if it does have a penalty provision, then we have to have a waiver penalty provision. What that means is if you don't contest, if you've been ticketed for a violation and you don't contest it, you pay the waiver amount. If you are ticketed and default, you pay the full amount. That's what the Judicial Bureau will impose. If you actually contest it and have a hearing, then the judicial officer will determine somewhere between the waiver amount and the full amount, and that's what will be
So
assessed.
it's a plea deal.
It's a plea deal, exactly. Encouraging people to not contest tickets and.
That sounded like a plea deal to me.
What about the inflatable men and creatures that are sometimes in front
What's
of?
the change in there?
Are those banned? Still
So,
banned?
yes, they have been banned. However, there was a very small window that we are closing in here, which is that the ordinance has for a long time said that anything that is a likeness of a person or a thing or a business was a sign. And so if it had arms, that was a likeness of a person. If it was a tube without arms, arguably it was not a likeness of anything. And so this amendment closes that window to say anything that's an inflatable thing that is drawing attention is a sign.
And now I have that problem on Teams on my phone because some messages produce those inflatable people that go like this, and it's,
Microsoft is beyond my
oh,
authority, but I appreciate the concern.
yes, yeah. But I think of our sign ordinance every time I see that. All right, any other discussion? Do we want to, we came out of the public hearing. Now the next action is to decide whether to take a vote on this, I think, right?
So I think staff recommend, correct me if I'm wrong, Doma, the staff recommendation is to make the change about the square footage of the perpendicular signs. So if you're interested in.
So you have a motion?
So I move to consider further amendments to the city's sign ordinance as presented in the staff memo accompanying this meeting, and cause all said amendments to be publicly warned and set for public hearing on June 7th, 2024 at 7 p.m.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Moving to item 8, which is discuss the FY24 annual allocations to social services partners and provide direction to staff on process. You said Martha's not here tonight because of a family.
So Martha's not here, but I can channel her.
Sure.
So as council likely knows, you have $15,000 in your budget in FY24, so the year that ends June 30th, to provide funding for social service organizations. This process has been the same since I have been here. It was kind of frozen during COVID and then maintained over the years. So you see in your packet the memo that outlines the social service partners that are very important to us as a city and our community, and the amount that has been distributed to them in the past years. Additionally, in the past years, you have allocated some seed money and then some ongoing money to the Trinity Education Center, and built in that allocation into the FY25 budget, although not necessarily named for that organization, but just increasing the social service spending pot so you'll have more leeways in the future.
So to be clear, the allocated amount in the fiscal 25 budget now is 28,000?
Yes.
Okay.
So we wanted, before just bringing you something to vote on, as we have done in past years, we want to provide you the opportunity to give us some additional direction over the next 2 months or so, if you wanted to go in another way. While I think our challenge is, while these have been set for several years, and we have other social service partners that Martha outlines here who have requested funds that we have not funded, the additional challenge is we are talking about very small pots of money. So $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. So to run a big application or RFP process for our social service providers for very small funds could be perceived as burdensome to them. So we're not looking for action tonight, just thoughts, reactions, guidance on how you would like us to proceed to bring you back something for action before the end of the fiscal year.
So I can give some background on this. So when I joined in 2016 on the council, this issue came up, and there were like, I think there were 20 or 30 recipients, right? And I made the comment like, well, if there were 1,000, we could give $1 each, or we can shorten the list down and give them more money. So we ended up shortening the list down to this collection of agencies, and kept the total amount, I think, pretty much the same, and just increased their amount. So That's why we came up with this listing, because we felt these agencies had the most benefit for the city. Now, I remember that August 2023 meeting. So is it 15,000 plus the 8 times, so plus 16,000 is the total?
So one of the items the votes you have already taken and money you've already approved and checks we've already cut was in August 2023, when the council was considering the significant surplus that we had at that point. You made the decision to, in addition to the previous year allocate an additional $2,000 to each of those organizations as a one-time gift.
Okay, one time.
You've
Okay.
already done that this year.
Oh, okay, right, okay. All right. Well, it's too bad that we don't have the other 2 counselors here to discuss this. I don't know if you have any opinions right now that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, my reaction to this was, again, these are symbolic in nature, but I have wondered why there was a separate one for the Trinity Educational. So my thought is, do we combine all that into approximately a $30,000 fund and, make distributions, but maybe agree to a practice that those are, I always get concerned about people counting on any amount of revenue on an ongoing basis. So maybe have a practice where that's in place with the fixed group for 3 years, and then there's some kind of report out to the community and public or to the council around what the benefits are of that 3-year contribution out of the budget. And then if there are some interested groups that want to come forward and participate, I understand the comments about turning it into a grant. These are not big items, but it might be an opportunity. I think about it from an RFP standpoint, where you want to touch base and sort of reevaluate every few years, or 5 years, whatever the right amount of time is. Do these organizations still reflect community values? And are there some new organizations that have started up that might benefit? That kind of trade-off or distinction. Just a thought. And I don't know why those funds are really separated.
From the Trinity? So you did ask that question. So that is solely at the discretion of the council. I think the funds were the previous funds have all been given out of surplus funding, not built into the budget general funding. And I think the initial thought, so you were here from that initial vote, was seed money for a really innovative program that didn't exist, to your point about sometimes new organizations emerge. And because the council had invested in 1 year, had chosen to reinvest for 2 years, given our surplus situation. Having said that, there is no future commitment previously made. It is completely at the discretion of this council and future councils how to allocate those dollars. So I think if I'm hearing you, maybe a recommendation, and bring back to the full when the other 2 members are here, is continue these smaller allocations for this fiscal year, and then with the bigger pot, put some more parameters around more multi-year commitment with reporting requirements at the end.
Well, and I guess if the single amount larger amount that's gone to Trinity is out of surplus, that's technically not in a budget. So maybe make a decision to increase the pot in a future budget and then have that longer term commitment. Or if that did not happen, that's going to be treated as a one-off contribution, correct? Which may or may not have funding based on surplus or otherwise.
Has there been a request for this next fiscal
Sorry,
year?
I'm skimming the memo. There has not been a request for this fiscal year yet. The 13,000 was added for the FY25 budget.
Oh,
So your
okay.
budget that will start on July 1 does have that $28,000 budgeted amount now.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood that was coming from surplus. So that would be the base.
Right. It's previously come from surplus, future, increase the base.
Yeah, that would make sense to me, something to that effect.
So are you proposing that in the future, we would do an organization by organization quick review, or have? them-
Well, I mean, I think the amounts are such that in any given year, you wouldn't want somebody saying, this is how we spent the $2,000.
yeah.
But if they were getting 2,000 over 5 years, it might be good to have the community here and the council here with that $10,000. You know, this is sort of how that's being spent on behalf of services offered to South Burlington residents and community members. So something longer.
Would you just want each of the organizations to send a report in? Would that
That
be
could
adequate?
suffice. Mhm.
I mean, these aren't huge amounts, right? But just to give some sort of a report about, you know, what services they ended up giving to the city, you know, or to the residents, right? And then that could be part of a packet, right, that you get. And I don't think I would want them to send a rep, you know.
Yeah, I think,
then-
and I think any of those could address
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And we can bring this back up with the other counselors a future time, too.
So not having been present for the 2016 meeting, Tim, that you referenced, it does feel a little random to me.
Well, it was
at-
random back then, too.
And so I question the randomness. One, I question the composition of the list. And it may be the right list. I just don't know. I would say Local Motion has given us tons of help, right, on the task force. They seem as deserving as any organization. The Community Justice Center seems deserving. So it just feels random to me. And the differing amounts also, I don't see a theme. So,
I think that it's just legacy because
Yeah.
of what value they were at back, you know, several
Yeah.
years ago.
so I mean, I guess I would say before we vote on these allocations again, to think about how do we eliminate some of that randomness and make this.
Well, it's not, what we did from the bigger random list was ask the question, which of those agencies really have distinct services for our residents, right? And that's how we came up with this core list of agencies. So it might look random, but any list of nonprofits that perform services is gonna look random, right? And that's how we got this. So, and there's some really important, and not that there aren't other important, you know,
Yeah, sure.
agencies too, so we can, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
We can always review and talk about other possible additions, you know, or replacements. But I think when we learn what those services are, then we'll be better situated to make a decision.
I probably should have said this in the beginning. So this is, I think, also a vestige of how other communities do this very differently. So when you have a town meeting with a floor vote, there are often articles from organizations like this that are voted on the floor. So those communities where the budget is built by the council and then voted on in one vote, in Vermont have, excuse me, gone down this path of more bucket.
But Jesse, do you have a recommendation for a policy around this that would make it less, you know, more understandable, I guess, or, I don't know.
Sorry, I'm getting over this head cold. I get these tickled things. I think it's very hard to ask struggling nonprofits to put in much work for $1,000. I think other communities also convene other Senate kind of side committees, or, you know, represent the council and represent the senior center, and
Take a little break. Take a
Sorry.
break.
talk amongst yourselves.
How about those Bruins and those Celtics, huh?
Well, I mean, it sounds like Jesse has some recommendations how to move forward. And I think these are, at the end of the day, there could be different organizations over time, or take that pot and split it up in a way that reflects the services delivered to South Burlington's community, whatever the criteria may be. But I mean, I'm open to have that discussion with the full council when our colleagues are back too.
Yeah. Do we have a committee that it would be natural for them to focus on? No one is jumping to mind.
No.
Yeah.
I would recommend that given that we're less than 2 months to the end of the fiscal year, and you do have to make these votes this fiscal year for the 15,000, I would recommend you either keep it as is or slightly adjust it, add in local motion or add in a few others that you as a body feel are important. And then when we have the larger group, the larger budget, do some kind of very simplified application about the impact on South Burlington residents, what you would do over 5 years, and a reporting requirement to report back in 5 years or something like that. And I think there's a way we could really make that accessible to the partner agencies and not make it overly burdensome.
Okay. Sounds like.
Sounds good. So we would have gone to item 9, but we decided to move it to the second meeting in June. So we're now at item 10, which is my favorite thing again, Mr. Steven, which is liquor control. So we need a motion to convene as the commission.
I move to convene as the Liquor Control Commission to consider the following applications for approval: Always Full Asian Market, second-class license; Charlie's on Fire LLC, first-class restaurant bar license; Farmers and Foragers, first-class commercial caterer; Hudson Can Tobacco license; Trader Joe's East, second-class license; Waffle Chalet, first-class restaurant bar license.
But you just moved to convene for now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So now I need a motion to, unless you want to just repeat what you said, approve all those following applications.
Approve all the applications I just read.
Okay, great.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Now we need to come out of liquor control.
Motion to come out of Liquor Control Commission.
I'll second that.
We have motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So those are all approved. We either do it in person or we do it remote, and we get it done, right? We're now at item 11, which is other business. Does anybody have any other business?
Just briefly, I think as a result of H.886 moving to the Senate and the potential for that passing, I believe representatives from the City Charter Committee may approach council to kind of move forward recommendations that were in the report that was delivered last fall, I think. So just a heads up on that.
Anything else? All right, so now we need to go to item 12, which is consider entering executive session for the purpose of discussing a labor relations agreement between the city and the library employees, 1 VSA 313A1B.
So I'll move that the council make a specific finding that should I make that motion now? Premature public knowledge of the council's discussion of labor relation agreements with employees would clearly place this public body at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And I now move, or do you want to make that, Tim? Right. I now move that the board enter into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1B for the purpose of discussing labor relations agreements with employees. And I'd like to invite, on our chair's behalf, Jesse Baker, Steve Locke, and Colin McNeil into session with council.
Second.
We have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, so we're in executive. All right, everybody's here. We are back in regular session for the City Council meeting, May 6, 2024 of South Burlington, and we finished item 12, which was an executive session. So now we're at item 13, which is a potential discussion and approval of labor relations agreement between the city and library employees represented by AFSCME. And Colin McNeil is here tonight. Do we want to just go ahead with the motion, or do we want discussion first, or? I'm ready for a motion.
So I move to approve the negotiated tentative agreement between the city and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees on behalf of the non-supervisory library employees as presented, and authorize the city manager to execute the final agreement.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your hard work on that contract.
Thank you all.
Now going to item 14, which is consider entering executive session for the purposes of discussing 835 Heinsberg Road and Burton Higher Ground. Do we have a motion for that?
I'll move that the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of the council's discussion of pending civil litigation to which the city is a party would clearly place this public body at a substantial disadvantage.
I second that motion.
We have a motion second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I now move that the city council enter into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1E for the purpose of discussing pending civil litigation to which the city is a party. And I would invite on the chair's behalf, Jesse Baker, Steve Locke, and Colin McNeil into session with council.
Second.
We have motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous again. All right, we're going to go back.
I'm sorry, before we go in, I just want to recognize that Almy is on the go-to meeting. Almy is one of our librarians and has been really instrumental in these negotiations, and just want to thank her for tuning in for that positive vote. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ami.
All right, so we're going to go to executive session, and we will not be coming back, so we will have adjourned at the end of. Thank you.